Everyone laughed when the billionaire pointed at the black man and said, "Fly this jet, and I'll marry you." Cameras were ready. The crowd was hungry. Humiliation was supposed to be the ending. But as the engines roared and the plane lifted into the sky, the laughter died. Because the man they mocked wasn't scared. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't pretending. And 30,000 feet above the ground, one terrifying truth became clear. They didn't invite a joke onto that jet. They invited the wrong man to underestimate. And some mistakes don't wait until landing to be felt. The sun didn't just shine that day. It judged. It exposed. It pulled every flaw, every smirk, every lie out into the open and refused to let anything hide. Heat rippled off the runway in slow waves, bending the air, making the world feel unsteady, like something was about to break. The private jet sat there in the light, white and polished, sharp as a blade, looking less like a plane and more like a throne built for people who believed the sky itself owed them loyalty. People gathered around it the way crowds always do around power. Phones were already up. Smiles already practiced, laughter already warmed in throats, waiting for the right moment to be released. It felt like entertainment before it even began. And standing just a few steps away from all that shine was a black man in a worn jacket. The jacket wasn't dirty, just old, the kind of old that comes from being used, not neglected. The sleeves were a little faded at the cuffs. The zipper didn't shine anymore. His shoes were clean but plain. His hands rested at his sides, steady. No shaking, no fidgeting. His back was straight, not stiff. Just balanced. His face was calm in a way that didn't ask for approval. His eyes were quiet, taking everything in without giving anything away. He looked out of place to them. That was the first judgment. Before a word was spoken. She noticed him the moment she stepped onto the runway because she noticed everything that didn't belong to her world. She was young, rich in a way that didn't come from patience or loss or long nights of doubt. Her money had always been there, stacked neatly behind her like a safety net that never tore. The sleeveless dress she wore clung to her figure like it was designed to remind everyone that youth and wealth often travel together. The fabric shimmered every time she moved, catching the sun, demanding attention. Her hair was perfect, not a strand out of place. Her smile came easily, but kindness never lived in it. She walked like the ground had been prepared for her steps, like every inch of concrete existed to support her arrival. The people around her leaned in without realizing they were doing it, pulled by the gravity of money and influence. Someone laughed before she even said anything, just to be ready. Someone else lifted their phone higher, framing her against the jet, already imagining the caption. She stopped a few feet from the black man and looked him over slowly, openly, the way someone looks at an object, not a person. Her lips curled, not in anger, but in amusement. "Fly this jet," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her voice cut clean through the air. "And I'll marry you." For half a second, the words just hung there, floating, unreal. Then the laughter came crashing in like a wave. Sharp, loud, uncontrolled. It bounced off the jet, off the runway, off the bright sky above them. Men in tailored suits smirked, exchanging looks that said this was better than anything they'd planned to film. Influencers angled their cameras, zooming in, hungry for a moment that would explode online. Someone whispered, not even bothering to lower their voice, "He doesn't even belong here." Belong. The word carried weight. It always did. The black man didn't move. He didn't laugh, didn't smile, didn't shrink. He didn't look at the phones, or the faces, or the jet right away. For a brief moment, he simply breathed. Slow, even, like the noise hadn't touched him yet. Then he lifted his gaze and looked at the jet, really looked at it, as if he were greeting an old acquaintance. His eyes traced its lines, the wings, the nose, the cockpit windows glinting darkly in the sun. Only after that did he look at her. Their eyes met. The laughter began to thin, not because anyone felt shame, but because silence has a way of unsettling people who are used to control. The pause stretched longer than expected. A second, then another. Phones kept recording, but the crowd leaned in, sensing something wasn't going the way it was supposed to. She tilted her head, her smile widening, feeding off the tension she'd created. "What?" she said. "Cat got your tongue?" More laughter, but weaker this time. Less sure. This wasn't a proposal. Everyone there knew that. It was a performance, a test. A billionaire seeing how far humiliation could go when wrapped in charm and wealth. She wanted him to react the way she expected, to stutter, to get angry, to walk away in shame, to prove in front of everyone that he knew his place. She had done this before. Not this exact thing, but the feeling, the way people folded when she pushed, the way discomfort bloomed on their faces when they realized she was untouchable. It always ended the same. She walked away entertained. They walked away smaller. She expected him to walk away, or beg, or break. Instead, he nodded once. It was a small motion, barely noticeable, but it landed heavier than the laughter ever had. "I'll fly it," he said. His voice was quiet, not timid, not loud, just steady, like he was stating a fact, not accepting a dare. The runway went still. The sound didn't vanish completely. Planes in the distance still hummed. The wind still moved. But the crowd froze, caught between disbelief and excitement. This was better than they'd hoped for. This was escalation. Her smile faltered for the first time, just a flicker. Then it sharpened. "You serious?" she asked, eyes narrowing slightly. "You even know what you're looking at?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at her again, really looked this time. Not at her dress or her wealth or the power she carried like armor. At her face. At the confidence that had never been tested. At the ease with which she used people as entertainment. "Yes," he said. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed again, louder than necessary. Someone else said, "This is going to be good." A man near the back shook his head, smiling like he'd already decided how this would end. Security shifted uneasily. One of them leaned toward her and whispered something, but she waved him off without looking. This was her moment, her show. "Fine," she said. "Let's see it." The black man took a step toward the jet. Each footstep sounded louder than it should have on the concrete. Cameras tracked him. Comments were already being typed, judgments already written before anything had even happened. In their minds, the story was done. This was just the punchline stretching itself out. As he walked, flashes of memory moved quietly behind his eyes. Not the kind you share, the kind you carry. Long nights, training fields, voices barking commands, simulators humming in dark rooms, the weight of responsibility sitting heavy on his chest while others slept, unaware. Storms navigated, lives held in balance, decisions made in seconds that echoed for years. None of that showed on his face. He reached the stairs and paused, one hand resting briefly on the railing. The metal felt familiar, solid, real. He glanced back once, not at the crowd, but at the open sky above them. The sun glared down, unblinking. He exhaled slowly and climbed. Behind him, the billionaire woman followed, heels clicking sharply against the steps, her confidence returning with each move. She threw a look over her shoulder at the cameras, a smile ready, already imagining how this clip would spread. A rich woman humbling a man who dared to step out of line. It would play well. It always did. Inside the cabin, cool air replaced the heat, but tension followed them in. The space was luxury wrapped in silence. Leather seats, soft lighting, everything expensive and untouched. He moved through it without hesitation, his eyes flicking to details most people wouldn't notice. Placements, switches, layouts. She watched him closely now, curiosity mixing with irritation. He wasn't acting the way he was supposed to. There was no awe, no nervous excitement, no fear. "You ever even been inside a cockpit?" she asked, leaning against a seat, crossing her arms. He didn't respond. He simply continued forward. That bothered her more than anger would have. Outside, the crowd pressed closer to the windows. Phones raised higher. They could feel it building. Something was about to happen. They just didn't know what. The black man stepped into the cockpit and stopped. For a moment, he just stood there, taking it in. The smell, the instruments, the familiar quiet before motion. His hand hovered, then settled gently on the panel, like greeting an old friend. His shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't outside. No one noticed that. What they noticed was the pause, the waiting, the breath being held. She leaned in the doorway, smirking. "Well," she said, "don't keep us waiting." He turned slightly, meeting her eyes again. There was no challenge in his gaze, no pride, just certainty. "Seat belt," he said calmly. Laughter burst out again, louder now, breaking the tension like a release. She laughed too, shaking her head, amused by the audacity. She strapped in, still smiling, still convinced this was all exactly what she wanted. The engines hadn't started yet. The jet sat there, patient. No one knew the truth. Not her, with her money and her confidence and her careless cruelty. Not the crowd, hungry for spectacle. Not the cameras, already shaping a narrative that would soon collapse. And that was the mistake. Because some men don't need to announce who they are. They let the moment do it for them. And this moment was only just beginning. They walked him toward the jet like he was part of a joke that had gone too far. The kind people laugh at first and then don't know how to stop. Security stayed close, not because he looked dangerous, but because he didn't look scared. One guard leaned in and whispered to another, eyes never leaving the man's back. A pilot standing near the wing let out a short laugh and shook his head. "She's serious?" he muttered, half to himself, half to the universe. Nobody answered him because nobody really knew what to say. This had crossed the line from playful cruelty into something heavier, something with consequences, even if no one was ready to admit it yet. The billionaire woman climbed the stairs first, sunglasses still on, chin lifted, her confidence untouched by the quiet rippling behind her. She moved like the world owed her smooth landings. Inside the cabin, everything gleamed. Polished wood reflected the light like calm water. Leather seats looked untouched, perfect, as if no one had ever truly lived inside this space. Gold accents caught the daylight and threw it back softly, warm and expensive. It smelled like money, like comfort, like a place built to remind people who belonged and who didn't. She stopped just inside the cabin and turned around, leaning one hand on the doorway, blocking the view like she owned the sky beyond it too. She looked him up and down again, slower this time, savoring the moment. "You ever even been inside a cockpit?" she asked, her voice casual, playful, sharp underneath. It wasn't a real question, it was a reminder. A line drawn in the air. He didn't answer. He stepped past her without touching her, without apologizing, without asking permission. He found his seat and buckled in with smooth, practiced movements. No rush, no hesitation. The click of the belt echoed louder than it should have in the quiet cabin. She watched him closely now, her smile tightening, something uneasy stirring beneath her amusement. Outside, the engines began to wake, a low hum at first, like a giant clearing its throat, then louder, stronger. The jet vibrated gently, a living thing preparing to move. Phones outside went up higher. People pressed closer to the glass, eyes bright with anticipation. They were waiting for a mistake, waiting for fear, waiting for proof that this moment would end exactly the way they expected it to. They wanted disaster, or at least embarrassment. They wanted to feel right. Inside, the tension thickened until it felt like something you could touch. The CO pilot glanced at the controls, then at the black man, then back again. His jaw tightened. "This isn't funny anymore," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough to be heard. It was the first crack of doubt, the first sign that this wasn't just a show. The billionaire woman laughed, waving a hand as if brushing away smoke. "Relax," she said. "Worst case? We get a viral clip." She leaned back in her seat, crossing her legs, still playing to the invisible audience she imagined was always watching her. She believed money was a shield, that nothing truly bad could touch her. The engines roared fully to life. The sound filled the cabin, deep and powerful, vibrating through bone and chest. The jet began to move, slowly at first, then faster, rolling down the runway under the burning sun. Outside, the crowd leaned forward as one, breath held, fingers hovering over screens. This was it. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Takeoff began. The billionaire woman's smile started to fade. The jet didn't lurch. It didn't shake or wobble the way people expected it to. It moved with impossible smoothness, lifting cleanly, confidently, like it knew exactly where it was going. Not rushed, not sloppy, precise, controlled, calm. The kind of takeoff that spoke of experience rather than luck. Her brows furrowed. She shifted in her seat, glancing around, searching for signs of chaos that weren't there. The cabin stayed steady. The angle was perfect. The climb clean. No panic, no sudden drops. Just ascent. The black man's hands moved over the controls with care, almost tenderness, familiar, reverent, like he was touching something that had once carried him through worse days and darker skies. His posture was relaxed but focused, every movement measured. There was no performance in him now, no awareness of cameras, no thought of the crowd. There was only the plane and the air and the path ahead. The CO pilot stared, confusion replacing skepticism. His eyes darted from the instruments to the man's face. Everything looked right. Too right. They climbed higher, the ground shrinking below them, the runway turning into a thin line, the people into dots. Laughter outside was replaced by silence, though no one could hear it inside. The billionaire woman swallowed, a small movement that betrayed her unease. She leaned forward slightly, peering toward the cockpit, as if looking harder might reveal the trick. Then the turbulence hit. It came fast and hard, without warning. The jet jolted violently, dropping for a heartbeat that stretched into terror. The cabin shook. A sharp gasp ripped from someone's throat. Another scream followed. The billionaire woman's hand shot out, gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath caught in her chest. "What are you doing?" she shouted, panic cracking through her voice, stripping away the confidence she wore so easily on the ground. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even turn fully toward her. "Correcting your mistake," he said calmly, as if explaining something simple, as if this was just another day. The jet bucked again, but less this time. His hands moved faster now, still steady, still sure. He adjusted, compensated, anticipated. He read the air like a language he had spoken for years. The storm outside raged, clouds closing in, turbulence pushing against the wings. But he met it with memory and instinct. Like someone who had done this before, many times, like someone who had learned long ago that panic only made things worse. The CO pilot's fear turned into awe. He watched in silence as the instrument settled, as the plane responded obediently. The shaking softened, the screams faded into shallow breathing and stunned quiet. Slowly, carefully, the jet leveled out, breaking through the clouds into clear blue sky. Sunlight flooded the cabin again. Silence replaced laughter. The billionaire woman sat frozen, chest rising and falling too fast, her grip still locked on the armrest. She stared at him now, really stared, seeing him for the first time. Not as a joke, not as a prop, not as a man out of place, but as someone who held her life in his hands moments ago and hadn't flinched. Her sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose, forgotten. Her voice came out small when she spoke again. Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He kept his eyes forward, scanning the horizon, listening to the hum of the engines, feeling the calm settle back into the plane. His silence felt heavier than any words he could have offered. It forced her to sit with her fear, her assumptions, her mistake. Outside the cabin windows, the sky stretched endless and indifferent. The truth was rising with them, climbing higher with every second they stayed airborne. It pressed against the moment, against her certainty, against everything she thought she knew. And she felt it then, deep in her chest, an unfamiliar feeling tightening its grip. Not laughter, not power. Fear, and somewhere beneath it, the beginning of understanding that this flight was no longer hers to control. The radio crackled softly at first, the sound almost lost beneath the steady hum of the engines, but it cut through the cabin like a whisper that demanded attention. The control tower was calling, not with anger, not with jokes, with caution, with seriousness. They were requesting the pilot's name, not the billionaire's name, not the jet's registration, his name. For a moment no one spoke. The CO pilot glanced at the panel, then at the black man's hands, then at his face. The billionaire woman held her breath without realizing it, her chest tight, her throat dry. The question hung in the air, heavier than turbulence ever was. He answered calmly. No pride, no drama, just his name. What came back through the radio changed the temperature of the room. The voice on the other end shifted instantly. The tone sharpened, urgent, alert, respectful in a way that could not be mistaken. Procedures were confirmed. Clearance was adjusted. A senior controller took over the line without explanation. Words like copy, affirmative, and understood replaced casual chatter. There was no laughter in the signal, only focus. The CO pilot froze. His hands hovered uselessly over his own controls as recognition hit him all at once, like a door opening in his mind. His eyes widened, not with fear this time, but disbelief. "You're that pilot?" he whispered, his voice cracking on the last word. He swallowed hard. "The one from the reports?" The billionaire's breath caught sharply. She felt the air leave her lungs as if someone had punched her from the inside. Her eyes darted between the CO pilot and the man she had mocked only minutes ago. Her world, so carefully ordered by money and confidence, began to tilt. The black man finally turned his head and looked at her. Not with anger, Not with revenge, just clarity. His eyes were steady, deep, unclouded by the noise that had surrounded him all day. In that look was no desire to embarrass her the way she had embarrassed him. There was only truth standing tall. "I flew combat missions," he said quietly, his voice steady over the hum of the jet, "when conditions were worse than this, when mistakes cost lives." He paused, not for effect but because memory has weight. "I trained test pilots you've never heard of, the kind who push machines to their limits so others don't have to." He glanced forward again, guiding the jet with ease. "I walked away when politics grounded skill." The words landed without force, but they struck deeper than shouting ever could. She stared at him, her lips parting, her mind scrambling to catch up. Combat, training, test pilots. None of it fit the story she had written about him in her head. None of it fit the role she had assigned him for her entertainment. The jet descended smoothly, the runway appearing ahead like a promise kept. There was no drama in the landing, no bounce, no skid, just precision, calm, control. The wheels kissed the ground so gently it felt like the earth itself was welcoming him home. The applause that might have followed never came because there was no crowd inside the cabin, only silence, respectful, heavy. Outside, the scene had changed. When the doors opened, the laughter that once filled the air was gone. Phones were still raised, but the hands holding them trembled now, unsure of what story they were filming. Faces looked confused. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked afraid of being recognized for what they had been moments earlier. Officials moved quickly across the runway, their steps purposeful. Not rushed, not panicked. They stopped at the base of the stairs and waited. When he emerged, they straightened. Salutes followed. Quiet ones, subtle ones, the kind that spoke of shared understanding rather than show. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. "That's him! No way! He saved 3 flights last year. I read about that emergency landing." Each sentence chipped away at the lie that had been built around him. The billionaire woman stepped down last. Her dress was still flawless, her hair still perfect. But the confidence that once wrapped around her like armor was gone. It had slipped away somewhere between the clouds and the ground, left behind with the laughter that no longer echoed. She opened her mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but no words came. For the first time in her life, money had nothing to offer her in that moment. Cameras turned toward her, hungry for a reaction. She gave them none. He stopped beside her at the bottom of the stairs, not blocking her, not cornering her, just standing close enough that she could hear him without an audience, without spectacle. "You offered marriage as a joke," he said quietly, his voice even, not cruel. "I offered you your life." She looked at him then, really looked. Saw the calm in his face, the restraint, the dignity, the man who had been tested in ways she had never imagined, and still chose not to humiliate her the way she had tried to humiliate him. Her silence was captured by every camera on the runway. For once, it was louder than laughter. The power had shifted, not through shouting or anger or revenge, but through dignity, through truth revealed without force, through a man who knew who he was even when the world tried to tell him he was nothing. And standing there under the open sky, surrounded by people who no longer knew where to look, one truth settled in like a lesson no amount of money could erase. The sky remembers who you are, and so does character. The story didn't just spread. It erupted. It leapt from phones to televisions, from quiet group chats to loud headlines, from whispered conversations to full arguments at dinner tables. Clips were replayed again and again. The moment on the runway, the silence, the landing, the look on her face when power slipped through her fingers. But it didn't unfold the way she had imagined when she first laughed under that bright sun. It didn't paint her as bold or playful or untouchable. It froze her in a frame she could not escape. She watched it all from behind glass walls and expensive screens, sitting in rooms designed to absorb shock, yet feeling every hit. People debated her intent. Some defended her, saying it was a joke gone wrong. Others didn't bother. They saw what they saw, arrogance dressed as humor, power mistaking itself for permission. The comments were brutal, not because people wanted blood, but because they were tired. Tired of watching dignity get treated like a toy. Her team moved fast. They always did. Statements were drafted, words were softened, sentences were polished until they sounded sincere. Apologies were issued. Explanations followed. She said she never meant harm. She said she respected skill. She said she was learning. The words traveled far, but they landed softly like feathers against stone. None of it erased the moment. None of it changed the way silence had swallowed her on that runway. Money could clean many things. It could rebuild buildings. It could rewrite contracts. It could buy forgiveness in some rooms. But it could not reach back into that moment and pull her out of it. The clip kept playing. The pause kept stretching. The lesson kept forming, whether she wanted it or not. Days passed. The noise shifted but never fully faded. And in the quiet between meetings and damage control calls, something unfamiliar grew inside her. Not fear, not anger, awareness. The kind that sits heavy in the chest and doesn't let you sleep. She asked where he was, not through assistants, not through lawyers. She asked herself, then asked again, until someone finally gave her an answer. A small airfield, quiet, ordinary, no cameras, no crowd, just open space and sky. She went alone. The day was bright again but different, softer somehow, the kind of light that didn't accuse, just revealed. She found him near the edge of the tarmac, standing beside a modest plane. Smaller, practical, no shine. He looked the same as before, calm, grounded, like nothing had shaken him. She stopped a few steps away. The distance felt larger than it was. "I mocked you," she said quietly. Her voice didn't echo. There was no audience to catch it, no phones to amplify it, just air. Because I thought power meant I could... The words tasted strange in her mouth. Honest. Unprotected. He didn't respond right away. He didn't turn fully toward her. He just listened, truly listened. The way people do when they're not waiting to defend themselves. She swallowed. Her throat tightened. I was wrong. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And for the first time in her life, there was no money behind it, no brand strategy, no safety net. Just a woman standing with the weight of her mistake. He nodded once. That was all. Power isn't what you hold, he said after a moment, his voice steady, his eyes on the horizon. It's how you treat people when no one can stop you. The sentence didn't accuse her. It didn't comfort her either. It simply existed. A truth placed gently but firmly between them. She felt it settle deep inside her, heavier than any headline. She took a breath and made an offer. Not casually, not playfully. Everything, money, opportunities, access. She could open doors no one else could. She could make his life easier. She could make his name known everywhere. He shook his head. Not out of pride, not out of spite, just certainty. What he took instead was what he already had. His dignity, unchanged, untouched by the noise, untouched by her apology or her wealth. It had been his before the runway. It remained his after the storm. She stood there for a long moment, absorbing that loss. Not the loss of money or control, but the loss of an illusion. The illusion that everything could be fixed with enough resources. When she left, she didn't feel lighter, she felt clearer. The world kept talking. But the tone shifted. People weren't just laughing or arguing anymore, they were reflecting. Parents talked to their children about respect. Teachers used the clip as a lesson. Strangers debated it in line at coffee shops, not about jets or billionaires, but about how easy it is to look down on someone you don't understand. Under that same bright, open sky, something had changed. The lesson traveled farther than the jet ever did. Never confuse silence with weakness. Because some people are quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they know who they are. Never assume someone's worth by where you meet them, because the ground you stand on tells you nothing about the storms they've already survived. And never mock a man who has already conquered skies you've never dared to enter. Because respect, unlike money, can't be inherited. It can't be bought. It can't be staged. It must be earned. And once earned, it lands softly. But it stays.